Welcome to the Trailblazing podcast. Today my guest is Matt Liotta from Volato. Is that pronounced correctly, Matt?
Yes, that's correct. It's
Okay.
an Italian word, so we all get excuses to mangle it, right?
The Italian word to fly. So Matt's an incremental private jet company? Fractional
Yeah,
ownership?
so we do fractional ownership as well as charter, but our primary business is fractional.
Okay. Can you kind of give my listeners a quick background of Volato and how you got started? It's pretty cool owning
Sure.
private jets. I mean, if you're going to have a company.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Volato is actually relatively new in the space. We're about a year and a half old now, and we do fractional ownership, which is a relatively established and well understood concept in private aviation. But we've made some innovations that we think are pretty interesting. Our focus is on 4 passenger or fewer missions. And the reason why we made that focus was because we looked at all of the private aviation missions that happen, and we found out that the majority of them only have 4 passengers or fewer.
Sure.
And so we thought that even though private aviation is well known to be very expensive, we thought that we could get a more efficient jet to do those missions. We could provide all of the luxury and expectations that everybody already had, but do so with some cost savings, make it financially efficient for them. And so we went out and we sought the best jet for those 4 passenger or fewer missions. And we selected the Honda jet, and we started building a fleet around that. And so today we are able to provide those missions to people in one of the newest, most efficient, very light jets out there.
It's pretty cool that I'd never seen a Honda jet before, and you went with the Elite, and it's pretty cool to see that the jet engines above the wings.
Yeah, that's the most distinctive feature about the Honda jet is those engines above the wings. I actually like to tell people sometimes that the engines are not just distinctive because they're above the wings. They're also distinctive because they say Honda on the side of them.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, what jet company do you know that makes their own jets and jet engines? So it's kind of interesting that way.
Yeah.
Right. But that it turns out that difference, that putting that engine above the wing, has resulted in some really good benefits. Namely, the cabin is quieter than when you have the engine mounted to the fuselage itself. And additionally, some of the plumbing and other things that are associated with an engine are simplified, and so it actually has more baggage capacity than a similar sized plane.
And the full lav helps too, right?
Yeah, well, it's a very well done lav. In fact, when I was looking at potential planes to use at Volato, the lavatory actually turned out to be a really big difference from one plane to another. Honda did a very good job in making it a good lavatory that people feel comfortable in. Some of the other manufacturers out there, for example, they would have like a lav with like a curtain. And what we believe and what we've confirmed with our owners is that most people actually much prefer a solid door over a curtain when they're in the lav.
Even in real life,
Right.
Much less a multi-million-dollar plane.
Yeah, so I think that was one of the key things that we did when we put this company together, is we really focused on the passenger experience. Many businesses in this space are run by aviation people, and they focus on the performance of the jet and build their company around the jet. And I know when I was demoing these aircraft, they were all excited to get me up in the cockpit and show me what it could do. And I said, I just want to sit in the back. Because at the end of the day, we are here for our customers. What other purpose is there?
Not being a pilot, but rather being a passenger.
Yes.
Yeah. And because, I mean, obviously you can appreciate the Garmin avionics and all the other things that come along with the Elite, but it really is ultimately, if I'm going to be a business owner and spend that kind of money, What do I get?
Yeah, and so for example, um, prior to the Honda Jet coming out, the Phenom 300 was the most successful light business jet in aviation. Um, and it's very popular in private aviation. There's literally hundreds of them flying right now. And what we found is that although it's a 6-passenger jet in most configurations, um, most of the people using it are only flying 2 or 3 people.
Sure.
And um, when you get those same 2 or 3 people on our plane, the Honda Jet, they actually like the experience much better because, again, it's quieter, but more importantly, they have more leg room. So we've taken out the seats, but it's not just the same as just taking out 2 seats and calling it a day. The seats actually now have been spread out to actually provide a much more comfortable experience.
It's interesting. I think, like you said, there are other companies out there, and it's always interesting to hear how you got your niche. I mean, your niche being the 4 passengers and under, still being fractional and using a unique plane. I mean, you made your own niche. How consciously was that?
Yeah, it was extremely uh, conscious. That I mean, our whole business plan sort of surrounded that fact. And it really came from me being a passenger. I was an owner on NetJets, and I would fly the Phenom 300 quite a bit with 1 or 2 passengers, mostly for business purposes,
Yeah.
because that's a very typical thing in business, needing 1 or 2 people to go somewhere. And, you know, unconsciously, I always had some feeling that there was something off there. And I think later when I started researching this, I put my finger on it. It was wasted seats.
Yeah.
And I think that the majority of people in private aviation are successful people. And I find that one thing is common among all successful people: they hate wasting.
Yeah. That's absolutely true in everything, not just their time,
Yes,
but everything.
exactly. Exactly. So I think that's one of the things that's really resonated with our customers is they appreciate that the majority of their missions are 4 passenger or fewer, and that this is a really good fit for them. And I think that many other operators have been sort of they have a diverse fleet with lots of different kinds of planes, and their smallest plane tends to be bigger, and
Yeah.
they're trying to sort of solve for all of your missions, and you end up with most of the time the wrong plane. So in our case, we think we end up with the right plane most of the time. And in those cases where someone needs a bigger plane, they have options with other carriers.
But once they become an owner at Volato, would they still? I mean, I don't know. You could still rent a bigger jet if you needed it from someone else.
You definitely can. Some of our customers continue to be fractional owners with other companies
Sure.
for that reason. In some cases, you can also charter with other companies. We actually, I know it sounds crazy, but we've had several owners actually fly 2 of our jets at once
Oh
to
wow.
accommodate eight passengers. And the way they explained it to me, and it does seem to match up, is that you know uh, renting an 8 passenger jet, it actually still costs more than two four
Then two four
passenger jets.
passengers. That's ridiculous.
So well,
Is
it
it?
is ridiculous, but it's also where we are right now is in aviation. The most modern jets are always the most efficient, and
Right.
so believe it or not, right now, um, there there's sort of a hole in the market for 8 passenger jets that are sort of new and modern. There's plenty of 8 passenger jets that have been around for many years, but there's very few really new and modern 8 passenger jets.
And is that just a matter of burning the fuel, as far as?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And so obviously, in the market right now, fuel has gotten to be very expensive,
Yeah.
and having the most efficient jet turns out to be really, really helpful.
I was just going to ask you because I drive for a living basically. I mean, I'm an outside sales rep with a pretty good sized territory. So I look at gas prices. I mean, I'm like I remember in California it's at 619, 649, 629 a gallon, and I'm like all of a sudden I started doing math on my trips. How is it
Mhm.
kind of the same way in private aviation?
It certainly is a factor. In fact, it may be the largest factor in the overall cost of private aviation. What's interesting is that not all of the operators treat fuel the same way. In
Oh,
fact,
okay.
what's very common is that they'll include a certain amount of fuel and then tell you that they're subject to fuel surcharges. So there's a lot of sort of hidden unknowns with the
Yeah.
fuel where a lot of owners, and I certainly experienced this when I was with NetJets. I literally didn't know how much it was going to cost me fuel wise until after I got the bill.
That's
Um,
yeah.
and there's a lot of different practices there that are questionable. Some cases people are making a margin on the fuel. In other cases, they're doing a fixed price fuel and then hedging. And then if they get that wrong, they end up being hurt, which is great if you're a customer until, of course, if the business is constantly losing money, it doesn't last, right?
Yeah.
Which is not great if you're a customer. So what we did with fuel is really straightforward. I came up with the fairest, most transparent thing we could do, which is we just pass fuel to our customers at our cost, no markup, just exactly what we pay. We send it to them, and we're aligned. We want it to be as cheap as possible. They want it to be as cheap as possible, and it's not a cost. It's not a cost center for us, and it's not a profit center either.
Well, I was just going to say it's hotels are becoming notoriously bad for hidden costs, resort fees that they don't tell you about, and then the taxes, and then the additional taxes, and then the parking. So I was wondering if fractional ownership's kind of the same way, where it's just everyone's trying to package it a little bit differently.
There is some of that. It's very common for people to mark up catering, ground transportation
Yeah.
services, etc. All of those, what we call ancillary services, we pass them along at our cost with no markup. We pride ourselves on being transparent. We feel like we offer a program where we've been up front with what our costs that we're going to charge to customers are, and we make money on that. We are in
Yeah.
the business of making money, and that's where we stop, right? We don't need to, you know, sort of hide things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, and I think people appreciate that they understand how we make money. They understand what the numbers are, and we can all move on and not have somebody in the background with the spreadsheet finding new ways
Trying.
to
Yeah.
make some margin on something here and there.
I, it's pretty cool that you're at least I don't know if you're still a NetJet owner, but you owned it. You went through the process as a customer. I think that's pretty key too.
Yeah, and I think that's really helped us because at the end of the day, I built a business model that I would personally sign up for.
Right.
And some of our early customers, I told them, I said, hey, this is what I didn't like where I was at. This is how I made it better for me. And I would have a number of other people say, yeah, I like that better
I
too.
thought the exact same thing. Yeah. Exactly. And now they're probably like, why didn't I think of starting Volato first? You know. It,
Well, like everything, when you see something new and good and straightforward, you're like, why didn't anybody think of that before?
yeah.
Because they didn't,
It,
right?
well, look at Amazon, right? If anyone
Right.
remembers how Amazon got started, it was just selling books online. I mean,
Yes.
literally, and
They're
they just
never
went,
going to make money doing that.
who'd buy a book online, right? A couple years
Right.
later, pooh, we were all wrong. You know,
Yes.
would so explain to me exactly because I told several people that I was going to be talking to you, and they kept going, well, how does that work? So how does fractional ownership work? Kind of in the
Yeah.
basics.
So actually, fractional ownership in general works by buying a piece of a jet instead of owning the whole thing. Most people say, "Oh, it's like a timeshare," and that is basically what fractional ownership has been in the past. We decided to change the model a little bit. We
Okay.
still sell you a piece, but the difference is that most fractional ownership, what they do first is they ask you, well, how often are you going to use it? How many hours per year are you going to fly?
Yeah.
And then based upon your usage, they tell you what size share you have to buy. And if you think about it, that fits with a timeshare, right? How
Yeah.
often are you going to use the
How
beach
many
house
weeks?
kind of
Yeah.
thing? Right, exactly. So what we said is, no, that's wrong. You know, and we took the inspiration from a beach house, right? So let's say that you go and buy a beach house and you're only going to use it, I don't know, 5 times a year, right?
Right.
What do you do with it the rest of the time? You hire a management company and they rent it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't use it that much and they're do a good job of renting it out, you might actually make money on that beach house, right?
Yeah. That'd
And
be the
the
ideal.
only right, that would be the ideal, and many people do that, and it's a whole thing, right? Um, and the biggest issue, right, is you got to buy a whole beach house, right? Which is
Which you don't need. Right.
tends to be expensive. And it turns out in the private jet world, there are people who are buying whole jets
Yeah.
and they are leasing them to operators and making money on them,
So they're time
and
sharing them.
only using right, but they own the whole thing. And what
Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
done on the innovative side is we let you fly as little or as much as you want. We don't really care how much you want to fly. We don't determine your share size based upon that. Your share size is strictly a financial consideration. Buy as the smallest share or buy the whole share, whatever you want to buy. And then what we do is we provide you a revenue share from the revenue that we earn flying
On
that
the
plane.
plane.
So in that way, it's like owning a beach house. When you use it, you pay for it. When you don't use it, we rent it out to others and we give you a piece.
Is it only can do you charter the jets as well?
We do.
Okay. So I was
And
gonna say,
every one of our owners makes money on that.
yeah,
So literally every revenue hour that the plane flies, whatever your ownership of that is, we share with you.
perfect. What are the downsides, do you think, when you think about
Well, I mean, I think the biggest downside with private aviation is that it's expensive, right? It's a luxury, and so um, there is no way to compare it to commercial travel. Some people say, well, what if I fill the plane? Is it about the same as buying a first class ticket? No,
no, no,
it's expensive, and I think the first thing you have to get past as a purchaser or a user is looking at what does it cost to fly for a particular trip. I
correct.
think we're all programmed by commercial aviation and even hotels to just look at, hey, I'm doing this trip. What is it going to cost me? But I think the better way to think about private aviation is like an annual sunk cost. I'm just going to spend X dollars per year on this luxury that's important to me, my family, etc. And I'm going to use it. And I'm not worried about any particular trip. It's going to, in the end, it's going to all add up to be about this expense per year.
Well, I interviewed a company owner who had a private jet, and at first he didn't feel comfortable talking about it because he knows, hey, they're expensive, and
Mm-hmm.
but he explained it. It's all a matter of saving time because the companies he was flying to, his customers, he would hit. He told me the actual flight that he would take, and I mean, going on Delta or whatever, forget about. I mean, you wouldn't be able to do it in one day.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. There's a lot of locations that are not well served by commercial
Yeah.
aviation where being able to fly there private makes all the difference in the world. Um, at my last company, we had a situation like that where the customer was in rural Nevada, and there was one flight a day to an airport that was an hour drive away from them. Um,
Yep. Exactly.
and so if you ever use commercial travel, there was no way to, sort of go in for a meeting and leave the same day. It was just impossible,
Yeah.
right? Unless you use private. And, there was an airport right by the customer, literally, you know, I don't know, a mile away from their location that you could
Yeah.
just fly right into.
Well, that's like I said. I flew into even some of like Twin Falls, Idaho. They have one flight that comes in the morning and it takes off in the morning, and then another flight in the afternoon comes in and then takes off. And so like I showed up early, and they're like, "No, the airport was closed." Like
Right.
I'm like, "What do you mean they're closed? Like there's no one here till like 3 o'clock." I'm like, "Okay." So
Yeah, that reminds me back in the early days of TSA. If you recall, there was multiple checks along the way,
yeah,
and I was at this small airport, and you went to the security desk, you checked in, but you couldn't go to your gate because it was shut down. You had to wait until they opened it, and then what they did was they shut down the ticketing desk, and then they opened the gate, and then the TSA people who were at the ticketing then moved to checking you right before you got on the
yeah,
plane.
yeah.
And I got randomly selected by the same TSA person 3 times that day. And I'm like,
Woohoo!
you've really checked me at this point.
I know you by now. That happened to me in Bozeman, Montana. Because the
Right.
guy, I flew into Bozeman, and the guy, I was sitting next to, he was a wildlife photographer from Africa, and he was going to Montana to shoot some stuff. And he's like, "Be careful when you leave." I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "Bozeman's a training airport for TSA, so they have new people and very strict, and then the supervisors are trying to teach them what to look for, so it takes forever to get through it." He was right.
Yeah.
I no longer carry my gripped stapler going to Montana because that's what they pulled me over for when I went through the
Wow.
X-ray. I'm like, okay, I don't need a stapler. So,
Yeah.
what are
Well,
some?
I mean, those were the good days when TSA was what we complained about. Now flying commercial
So true.
I mean, I know that the early thing was use private aviation because it saves you time. You don't have to sit at the gate. You don't have to do TSA, all those things. But I mean, now commercial aviation post COVID is just, it's really an awful experience.
What do you think's awful about it? I don't want to make a bias because I have my own
Well, I
stories.
mean, obviously you got to wear a mask throughout the airport the whole time you're on the plane. Um, that period of time when you've gotten on the plane early because you're a diamond medallion or
Yeah,
whatever you are, and you're just sitting there waiting for everybody to board. It used to be that you could sort of put yourself in a bubble, maybe start doing entertainment or something like that
yeah,
in your world and just wait. But now it's like this people on repeat explaining how to wear a mask, what they're going to do to you if you don't wear a mask, why it's important that you wear a mask.
that's so
And
true.
man, if you're going to drink or eat something, you better stuff
Put it
that thing
in.
down
Yeah,
fast and put that mask back up before I mean, because if they see you that mask down in between sips, they're going to get you. I mean, it's like, wow.
yeah.
I mean, you guys have taken a new level of just unhappiness here on travel.
See, I flew in January. I went to Dallas, and I won't say the airline, but it was Southwest, and it was the same. I felt the exact same way you just said it. I felt like I was being berated. And I was like, I haven't even been on the plane yet. I haven't done anything wrong yet, and the stewardesses were saying like exactly what you just said. It was like,
Yeah, and that's just the boarding,
yeah, I know.
right? We haven't even taken off yet.
That's what I'm saying. It's like I felt like a 10-year-old. Like my mom was yelling at me again. I'm like, I hadn't done anything wrong. I'm wearing my mask. Why are you yelling at me? So
Yeah, and then of course now with the even if you do get into a business class or first class seat, they hand you like a Ziploc bag of stuff inside it, and like here you go. Um, good
yeah,
luck with that.
enjoy your trip. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that's going to change this year? Do you think it's going to
Well,
go?
I mean, I would hope so. I mean, I think that the whole mask mandate situation has always been questionable at best in aviation, and now that most states don't require it in public settings anyway, it's
Now it's
hard to
just federal.
understand why it's still done at airports.
Yeah. Well, see, and I can tell you, you're based in Florida. All the people that live, my daughter lives in Tennessee. She's like, I haven't worn a mask in over a year. She goes, I don't even know where my mask is. And I live in California, and like, we are still like, where's my mask? Oh shoot,
Well, it is fascinating as a traveler,
Yeah,
who's traveled a lot during COVID. And every place was different how people were dealing with
yeah,
COVID. And yes, I'm in Florida, which is unique, in how they handled it. I could tell you stories, but I found it really fascinating, the expectations that people had, that when you were in their place, you must have been one of them and you knew what was standard.
yeah.
And so you would show up and they would just think that you were an alien because you weren't following the local practices for COVID.
Well, in the last probably 8 weeks, 9 weeks here in California, L.A. City had different regulations than L.A. County, which was different than every other county surrounding LA County, and then the state had different mandates. I mean, there were literally 4 different mandates. So, like, if I went into, it was just bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, we were at a conference and we checked in, and the person asked me if I was vaccinated. I said yes, and they handed me a little bracelet to say that I'm COVID safe.
Yeah.
And then one of the people who worked with me checked in, and they're like, "I know it's a stupid question, are you safe from COVID?" And he's like, "Yes," and he got the bracelet, and I said, "But you're not vaccinated." He's like, "Well, he asked me if I was safe, so I said yes."
Yeah. I used to joke with my daughter that I self-identify as a vaccinated person. So that's a whole different thing.
Yes, absolutely. But COVID is highly wrapped up in travel these days, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you think it was a good thing or a bad thing that you started kind of Volato during COVID, right? Or right at the
Well,
beginning of it?
I mean, absolutely a good thing. The the market for private aviation post COVID is unprecedented.
Yeah.
Um, so so think about these numbers, right? Private aviation's usage is higher than it was pre-COVID, so that's great. Uh, but prior to COVID, the majority of private aviation usage was business usage. Post COVID, now that its overall usage is higher than it's ever been, the majority of it's personal usage.
Wow.
So I think that's an interesting statistic, first of all. But second of all, everybody asks, is this the new normal? And I say, no, we haven't even gotten started yet, because wait till business travel comes back.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, well, and do you see a lag in it? Because I know a lot of people, myself included, like I don't fly to Denver anymore. I used to go 4 times a year, and our company said no more. Like we're going to do virtual meetings now.
And I think, like many things, there's always an overcorrection. Was there a lack of using video conferencing tools pre-COVID? Absolutely. Will we never meet in person again? Absolutely not.
Right.
Face-to-face meetings are so important. And doing business, I'm sure if you're a salesperson, you could probably tell me right now whether you think a video conference is as good as an in-person meeting.
No.
And I have a pretty good idea what your answer is.
No. They're not even
Exactly.
close. I mean, that they're literally not. I can do it with. Here's what I've told some of the other people that I've had on the show, the business people, is I can if I know my account, my customer, then we can do the video call, and it's not too bad because I know their personality. I know I can kind of read them already. But that's the stuff you learn talking face to face, and you do not get that anymore. And there's potential for distractions everywhere, i.e., a cat or a dog or
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, we've seen so much. I mean, how many people have like accidentally did something on the video conference because they were trying to multitask or what
Yeah.
have you? I mean, there's so many things that, at the end of the day, does there need to be face-to-face meetings for everything? Do we all need to report to an office? Do we all need to do business travel for every meeting? No. But does that mean that we're never going to go to an office again? We're never going to do business travel again?
Of course not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think right now we're still a little too much dependent on video conferencing. And I think that inevitably people like people. They want to
Yeah.
spend time with each other. And that's what is going to happen. And I think there's been health reasons that many people have been concerned, but I think we're past that at this point. I think people are ready to just get back to normal, whatever that is going to be. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, and how what time frame do you see that being? Is it? Do you think it's going to just depend on the COVID responses?
Well, I think, if you're here with me in Florida, you wouldn't even know that COVID is a thing anymore, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it used to be that they just, were different in how they were handling COVID. Now it's like everybody's moved on.
I know, man. Like I said, I've traveled to Tennessee and I've traveled to Dallas and some other states that are that were always less COVID restricted versus living
Mhm.
in LA County, which is the most restrictive county we've had so far. It's bizarre, and that's why I was trying to tell my wife when I travel, I'm like, people don't like when you go to they don't even know like COVID's out there. I mean, they know it, but it's not a daily thing. Where for us, it's a daily thing. Like in LA, you had to have a mask to go anywhere, and if you didn't have it, they
Uh,
didn't let you in.
yeah. In the early days of COVID, I traveled from Florida to Massachusetts, and that was really enlightening
Yeah,
about how different things were. Um, as it like I was there, and some of the people were saying, "I thought you had a quarantine when you got here because you're from Florida."
yeah.
Yeah, like, well, they might be checking people at the commercial airport, but where I flew in, there was nobody there waiting for me.
I just got off and that's it.
Right. And I was at a grocery store in Massachusetts, and there was a person who had on um, like a Tyvek suit, a mask, a face shield, wearing gloves, and their wallet was in a plastic bag. And it was just like, wow.
Yeah, the guy takes it serious, and I don't
I
have a
mean,
problem with that. To be honest, I mean, I don't. You do you. If you
right.
want to wrap yourself up, wrap yourself up. I don't care. I mean, I guess because I've been around so much, I see a lot of different people. Anyways, just the more you travel, the more you see interesting people.
And that's what's so great about travel. And I think that's one of the things that Americans need to do a lot more of is get around our country or even internationally, because it's so insightful to see how other people live. And you really feel great about the world and people when you see the diversity that exists out there. um, I am a big proponent of travel, especially international travel, and I find it's really too bad how little Americans travel. I mean, I I think I read somewhere that only 20% of Americans actually have a passport,
Wow,
and
really?
many people have never even left their state.
Yeah, that I know for a fact. I've talked to some of those people too, and I'm like, really? Like, just get in a car, just go somewhere. But everyone's
Absolutely.
everyone's different, I guess. You, once you fill up your fractional ownership on all your jets, what do you do then? Is it just working on charters? Is it buy new jets? Does that ever happen?
It happens every day. We're sold out on jets we haven't even delivered yet.
Yeah.
So um, for example, we've got another delivery coming later this month. Sold. There, we got another jet coming in April. Sold. Another jet in May. Sold. July. Sold. I think the next jet that we haven't started selling shares in is in August at this point.
Wow. Is that about what you get one a month or about that from Honda?
Right now, the pace is one a month. But when I get off the phone with you, I'll call Honda and beat them and say, "Come on, I need more jets." So,
But they're made in North Carolina, right?
Yeah, they're made in Greensboro,
Yeah.
and it's sort of amazing to think about. I mean, Honda is a Japanese company, but the jet, it has the highest percentage of U.S. parts of any jet in the world.
Wouldn't that be funny if you had a Honda jet and it said made in the USA?
Well, it is. I mean,
I know.
it's like, you know, I think it's something like 87% sourced in the USA.
I mean, that would constitute made in the U.S.
Yeah, no, I mean but you see this with automobiles. If you look at an American automobile, it says, 51%
Yeah.
sourced in the USA. You look at a Japanese and it says 49% sourced in the USA. It's like, who are we kidding?
Yeah. Well, it's we do the same thing in the clothing industry. There's a lot of ways that people get. I mean, on the seam of your shirt right here, if you make it in China, but you don't put the seam from here down to the waist on both sides, it's not a shirt. So if you bring that part piece in to the United States and do that one stitch here and one here, you can technically say it's made in the USA.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I just wondered if I don't know on the private jet side, is there a negative? I mean, obviously, people are made in the USA and all that. Do you use that as a sales feature that your jets are made in North Carolina, basically made in the U.S., even though it's a
we
Japanese company?
we don't emphasize that from a sales standpoint,
Okay,
but wherever asked about it, we certainly answer it transparently, like we do everything else.
sure.
I just find it fascinating that that is the case, right? Because we think of American aircraft manufacturers like a Boeing
Well,
or
yeah,
a Cessna, et cetera, and here it is, a Japanese company. And obviously there's the historical context of Japanese automobile manufacturers, and
yeah.
here they're making the one that's the most American,
I know that's pretty crazy
right?
in a good way, but pretty crazy. So
Yeah.
what other? I know I had heard that you're looking at opening up Carlsbad.
Yes, we have opened up Carlsbad,
Okay.
and we just opened up in Houston because we actually
Oh, good.
acquired a company based in Houston. So we now have bases in Carlsbad, Houston, Baltimore, Atlanta, St. Augustine, and Fort Lauderdale.
All good spots. Are there
Absolutely.
any what are the next ones? Do you have any ideas, or maybe you can't talk about it?
We definitely have some ideas.
Okay.
Probably something in the Midwest will be coming.
Is that does that just help with getting refueling, or that doesn't matter, right? I mean, you can land wherever.
No, where we have bases doesn't matter from a operational standpoint to the customer. We'll fly you wherever you want to go.
Yeah.
So that's just not an issue at all. What the bases really do is they're a place for our employees, and that's where we can offer a higher level of service. And what we try and do is concentrate owners and employees relative to each other. So if you could imagine, a typical pilot schedule, they might be flying all over the country and just be gone on the road for a week or more,
Yeah.
right? And then they go
Absolutely.
home. But if we can base them in the same place where our customers are, and they can fly out and fly back, they can be at home
I'd
a
be a
lot
lot
more
happier.
nights. Yeah, and what we find is that our goal as a company is not that different than many other companies, right? We want happy customers, but most of our customers time is spent with our crew. So
Yeah.
we believe that if we have happy crew, we're more likely to have happy customers.
Guaranteed. I mean, that's makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah, so we've focused a lot on that. We hire some of the most qualified pilots in the world. We pay them better than anyone else for HondaJet pilots in the world, and we try and have a really good schedule for them so that they're home more often than they're not.
I always ask business travelers, and I can ask you personally, but I was also curious. I always ask business travelers how do they fill up their downtime? Whether if they're flying or they're at airports, and are they listening to music? Are they reading? Are they doing work? Are they trying to zone out? And it's a mixed bag. You know, everyone does something differently. But I was curious, what have you seen in the private plane world?
I think a lot of people are busy working in the private plane world. Wi-Fi is an expectation that everybody
Yeah.
has now. They can't be disconnected when they're flying even an hour. And the Wi-Fi is a much better experience on a private plane, because it's oftentimes virtually the same hardware that you'd find on an airliner, but it's shared among four people instead of 400,
Yeah.
right? So
Do you have to on a private plane? Do you have to keep all your Wi-Fi's off when you're taking off and landing?
no,
No
you
comment.
do not. Yeah, and you can leave on your cell phone too if you want. I mean, it's actually there is a really good reason to put your phone in airplane mode, which is it won't kill the battery looking for a cell tower that's not there.
Forever. Yeah.
Right. So that's a good reason to put it in airplane mode, but we do not require you to put it in airplane mode.
Right there's worth buying a fractional ownership in Volato.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that for a lot of people, the ability to, just go right to the plane and not have to go through TSA, not have to sit at a gate. And when does the plane leave? Well, you tell us, you schedule it, right? That's a huge, huge factor. Oftentimes, what we'll have people do, which is sort of a different way to think about it, is they'll call us and they'll say, "Hey, I need to get to this place by a certain time.
Yeah.
When should I leave?"
Oh, I gotcha. So
Right?
because yeah, they might not know the exact schedules. Hey,
Right. And we can say, okay, well, you're leaving from here, going there. This is how fast the plane flies. If you get here by this time, we'll get you there. No problem.
that's pretty cool. And how much less? I mean, flight time is it roughly the same or is it a little bit faster?
Well, it depends on the plane. Generally speaking, a Honda Jet is slower than a typical airliner,
Right.
but also it can fly higher than a typical airliner. So that manifests itself in a couple of interesting ways. One, if you're flying east, it's pretty fast because you got the wind behind you.
Yeah.
If you're flying west, it definitely is slower than a typical airliner. Um, the other thing is weather tends to be lower, like where
Yeah.
airliners fly. So they're usually flying somewhere between, 30,000 and 40,000 feet, whereas the ideal altitude for Honda Jet is 43,000 feet.
Right.
So we can fly right above the weather.
That's pretty crazy though. I mean, it's a cool concept. I actually like that the layout of the plane, and I watched a couple of the videos on the de-icing and all the latest. I mean, is there ever a thought of using a different plane, or would that just go outside of the business plan of the four passengers?
Well, certainly there's a thought of it. I mean, you know, people sometimes misunderstand us when we talk about that we identify the majority of missions being four passengers or fewer. I remind everybody that that's the majority of missions. There's
Yeah.
still missions that require more than that, and our customers who've signed up still do have those missions that they either have to rely on another air carrier or charter to do. And we really like our customers. We wanted to always take care of them.
Sure.
So we're certainly considering how to do a better job, and potentially put in some other types into our fleet. Probably not at the same number as the Honda Jet, but nevertheless, it does seem like it would be valuable to our customers to have an additional type.
Yeah, because that's always about forward growth, right? I mean,
Yeah, and in fact, Honda Jet has announced a new plane that's going to be an eight-passenger plane that is supposed to come out in about 4 years.
wow, really? Does it take that long to develop a plane?
It does. They say the only thing fast in aviation is planes.
So I just wanted to finish up. Is Volato something that are you always looking for future business? Meaning, I mean, constant?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most businesses, we're here to grow, and we've done a good job in identifying a need, and we intend to do our best to help fill that need.
What's the best way for my listeners to kind of follow Volato and see what you guys have coming up or get in contact with you guys?
Well, we've obviously got our website and social media. Those are all great ways to follow us. And of course, if you're interested in getting in touch with us to talk about becoming a fractional owner, we certainly have our phone number, and our salespeople would be happy to speak with you.
Yeah, they would. Is it flyvolato.com?
Flyvolato.com, that's correct. And we're,
Okay.
of course, up on the typical social media sites. And we also do have an event calendar where we'll be doing demos at a variety of different airports throughout the country.
Are you going to be doing any demos at Carlsbad?
Absolutely.
Oh, cool.
If you'd like, we can certainly let you know the next time we have a demo at Carlsbad.
Yeah, actually, I knew it was pretty cool. He used to have a private plane based in Carlsbad. Lived in Fairbanks Ranch, but he worked in Inland Empire, and he would fly every day. Just it's kind of weird to think that you would just fly a jet every day just to get to work. But
well, I mean, I've heard about the traffic in LA. It might make
and
sense.
And it's all real.
Right.
Weren't you just here? You should have seen some of it.
Well, I arrived on a Sunday, so it wasn't as bad, I think.
Oh,
but
that's not bad. Sundays are the good days, actually. So, well, hey, I appreciate the time, Matt, and I'm looking forward to it, following you guys and seeing the continued growth. That's awesome.
All right. Well, hey, I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Matt. Talk to you soon, buddy.